Hi everyone, Josh Knight the First here with you again for another Exade replay, this time covering episode 2 of Kamen Rider Exade. Of course, now we've gotten a little bit further into the series, really another week, and we can talk a little bit more about what's going on. But first I want to start talking about the new theme, which is called Excite. This is by the artist Daichi Miura. He's an artist who's very big in Japan right now. His latest single, Cry and Fight, which was just released earlier this year in March, has done very well, so it makes a lot of sense for him to be the go-to person here on the single. Along with the song itself, which is very nice. I like it. I really like that upbeat tempo he's got there. Not quite gamerish, but it still feels more energetic than last year, even though I can give Ghost that much. Ghost's theme, We Think Therefore We Are, was very energetic, but it still didn't quite fit the series. This seems to fit quite well. When looking at the visuals, though, there's a couple of callbacks there that I wasn't quite expecting. There in the visuals of the opening, you can see callbacks to the openings of Decade, to Ryuki, to Faiz. I mean, it's very interesting that they decided to do something like that, and I very much like that. As far as the visuals of an opening goes, as far as giving it the feel of the series, you know, you have about a minute, maybe a minute 30 seconds to go ahead and get this across what the series is about. I'm surprised that it's taking itself a little bit more seriously than I thought it would, and I like that, I really do. Because for something that could very easily come off as very childish, very over the top, this seems to be right at the level it needs to be to enthrall people. I know a couple of people have been looking at this on the internet, seeing it and reacting like, you know what, that's better than I thought it was. I totally want to watch this, even though I didn't know what it was to begin with. So good on Toei for getting Daichi Miura on this. I'm very much looking forward to the single once it's fully released. Now on to the episode itself. Now this episode, as you can kind of tell here, centers more around the second writer, Kamen Rider Brave. His civilian form, or a civilian identity I should say, is Kagami Hiro. Now he's the son of the director of the hospital. He has studied in America for a little bit of time and now has come back to Japan, apparently being the second person there in the series who is found to be compatible with the gamer driver and can perform these operations as a Kamen Rider. Now very quickly we see he is in very stark contrast as far as how he does his job and goes about this job to Emu. First off, he is very no-nonsense. He doesn't involve himself very much with the patients that he's working on, as opposed to Emu, who very much cares about the lives of his patients and what they are striving for, what makes them happy. Hiro is not like that. He's the type of person who just wants to get in, get out, get the job done as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and that's who he is. From the get-go, from the scans of the series as we were getting them coming in from different magazines, we were told that he was going to be a very tsundere type with an affinity for sweets. That's definitely seen here. He's got cake, he's got pie. Who knows, next time we'll see him with a cream puff, something like that. I wouldn't doubt it. But here we've seen that. The other thing about him that's very apparent is that since he's a surgeon, he's always kind of in this mindset that he's always in an operation. He's always in surgery. So when somebody's next to him, especially at the end of the episode when he's got a pie there in front of him, he's like, scalpel. And really what he means is a knife, because he wants to cut into it very specifically. I'm kind of the same way when it comes to something like cake or pancakes myself, so I kind of get that, but as far as making him human, you know, somebody relatable, that's about as far as they're going for right now. Admittedly, he was just introduced, but that's just where we are at this moment. Now, as far as his capabilities as a Kamen Rider are concerned, that's something completely the same. Unfortunately, he doesn't really change up very much from there. He goes into the fights thinking this is not a game. In fact, he and Emu kind of come to a head on that. Emu thinks of it as a game because he's very much a gamer. That's what he does. He's the genius gamer. He's the genius surgeon. Hiro sees this as an operation, so he doesn't take it as seriously as a gamer would, although he does take it seriously in his own right. So they're not necessarily... Neither one of them is necessarily wrong, it's just they're coming at it from a different aspect, which is fine. Now, throughout the fights in the episode, we see kind of more definition of what the roles of the forms in the series are. Specifically, Asuna, or Poppy People Papo, demonstrates to M that the only way to separate the patient from the bugster is to defeat them in level 1. If they don't do that, then the patient will get increasingly more sick up until the point that they completely disappear. As you can see there, they're kind of fading in and out there when Emu and Hiro do not defeat that first bug star. A more interesting thing that they seem to come to the conclusion of is that the bug stars seem to affect people who are under a lot of stress. Now that's interesting to see because a lot of people nowadays experience a lot of stress. Hell, I know I do. But it's interesting to see that that's something that's a plot point here. It's something that's very legitimate. Stress does make your body sick. So it's very interesting that Toei would decide to go ahead and implement something that real into their plot. It actually makes it a little bit more palpable to me. Now, of course, Brave is the RPG-based rider, so when he transforms and he gets out there on the battlefield, he has little treasure items that show up throughout the world, which are treasure chests, which is different from Exade. Exade has these little, like, Mario blocks that show up, and next week when Snipe shows up, Snipe will have barrels that he'll have to get treasure out of. The thing that seems really funny to me, and again, I'm very thankful that they're keeping to the motif there, is that just naturally Emu knows that he needs to go for those power-ups to help him defeat the boss quicker. Whereas Hiro, he doesn't go for that sort of thing because he just doesn't know to go for those sort of things. Because, of course, he comes from a completely different world than that. Now, I'm very happy to report that the wirework in this episode was still on par. Exade's jumping around still makes sense. Yes, he's the platformer. For Brave, he doesn't nearly need that much. He's just using sword work, which is absolutely fine. As for the finishers, I'm happy to report that this week, as opposed to last week, I didn't talk about it last week because I didn't want to get my hopes up personally, but they're keeping the callback that Exade does, that right before he does a finisher, he blows on the Gashot, which is, of course, a notable callback to the 90s. I can't remember how many times I personally had to blow on a Nintendo cartridge to get it working again for I don't know how many games. You know, DuckTales, Batman, Tetris, whatever. You had to blow on them and somehow that would magically fix it. I'm glad that they kept that reference there. Additionally, we also see in the fight, I was wondering whether or not they were going to make use of this or if it was just for ornamentation, but you can see there on the chests of the riders, they have a health bar. And when Exade took a pretty strong hit earlier in the episode, his health bar actually went down. And I'm like, yes, you're actually going to use that. It's just not there for color or show. Great! Awesome, keep it up! The other interesting thing we had to look at in the episode is basically the relationship between the Genm Corporation and the hospital itself. Apparently they are working together. The Genm Corporation was the one that sponsored the creation of the gamer drivers. They're the ones that came up with the technology, working with the hospital in reference to this event that happened 5 years ago that they still haven't expanded upon, but more than likely we'll get that pretty soon. Also, as far as technology goes, it's interesting to see that the bit of technology that we saw last week, but it was expanded upon more here, was the use of the stethoscope that the riders use. Specifically, it's a combination communicator, stethoscope, scanner, cell phone that they have there. It's multi-purpose. I wonder if they're not going to sell that. I'm surprised that they didn't start selling that right away, given that there's so many Exade toys out there already, but I wouldn't doubt that they'll come out with it a little later on, because that seems like a fun enough thing to play with. So for right now, that's what we're given in this episode. Next episode, we're going to see the inclusion of Kamen Rider Snipe, who of course was this doctor that was disgraced. He's not really a licensed doctor, but he's there fighting because there's some sort of eternal dream that he thinks he can obtain by getting a hold of a Gashot, which apparently at the end of this episode he paid a lot of money to obtain. So I'm interested to see where they're going with this. They've already got one person starkly in contrast with Emu, and then we're going to have a third person involved who we're not sure what he's after, but he, of course, is going after his own motivation, his own dreams. And then we still have to have Kamen Rider Laser introduced because, admittedly, yeah, it's been a couple of episodes and we haven't gotten our bike yet. But I like where they're going with this. It seems like a steady build and nothing seemed very rushed. I appreciate the fact that they didn't overdo the comedy here. I mean, admittedly, it was kind of weird when Hiro showed up on scene and he had his nurse assistants put the belt on for him like it was an operation. I mean, I get it. It makes sense for his character. But I like that it wasn't overplayed. Even Emu, when he stubs his toe or bangs his knee against something, that happened twice, but it wasn't so, you know, all over the place like some other Rider series have been. I appreciate that. I imagine that they might have gotten a couple of complaints for how that's been the last couple of years, and now they've finally decided to tone that back and actually decide to, oh, I don't know, focus on the story, which I'm so very thankful for. But that was everything that happened in this episode. You guys can go ahead and comment here, tell me what you thought of the episode, what you're hoping the series is going to bring. And of course, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been Exade Replay for Kamen Rider Exade Episode 2, Two Geniuses? No thank you. I'm JoshKnight1st. I will see you guys again next week.